Hello out there, everybody. You are out in the world. That's what you're doing right now. Look, I don't want to play psychic or anything, but that is what's going on. And while you're there, you were kind enough to let us join you there in your ears with whatever else you're doing. So it's always an honor to have anybody out there listening to the things that I'm saying. Welcome back to The Broken Brain. I'm your host, Dwight, of course, and we are going to be talking about some fascinating and applicable things to everybody's life. That, of course, is the goal of each of these episodes, is that we can apply these things and walk forward with them. You know, we're recording this at the beginning of 2025 AD, as a matter of fact. And this is a time of the year where people often focus of the whole New Year's deal and say, what do I want for the upcoming year in my life? And I think this episode is going to tie into that very, very well. I'm joined today by Chad Foster, who is an expert in all kinds of things that have to do with accomplishments, that have to do with expansion, change, innovation, growth, and particularly embracing the difficulties and obstacles and discomforts of those things. Chad is very, very accomplished, and we'll get into some of the different things that he's been, but he is the creator of CRM software for the visually impaired, which allows for some things that apparently lots of people weren't even trying to do at the time that you developed that. And also the first executive from Harvard Business School's leadership program to graduate with blindness. And just a lot of different things that you are into and that you have experienced in your life that we're going to get into. Chad, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Dwight. Thanks for having me.
Tell everybody a little bit about your background and where you've come from and some of the things that you do so they kind of, get a sense for who you are.
Well, I'll talk, I guess, mainly do a little bit of a thumbnail of the early years, and we can double back to that. And then I'll get into what I'm doing today, which kind of think of as Chad 2.0. Chad 1.0 had some obstacles coming at him that were pretty challenging. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, lived a relatively normal childhood. My parents noticed at 3 years old, I was having a hard time seeing in the dark. So they took me to Duke University, where I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa at the age of 3.5 years old. And the doctors told them it could eventually result in total loss of eyesight and that my parents should sign me up and put me in a special school for the blind. And my parents thought about that, and instead they decided to sign me up for soccer because that's what you do, I guess. And I could see, enough to play soccer at that time. And I played sports growing up. I played soccer and football and basketball, and I was able to ride bicycles and motorcycles and drive a car. And my eyesight, though, did have limitations, and I would learn the limitations of my eyesight by running into things. And so a lot of accidents at dusk when I was learning what I could and couldn't see. I remember one time I was 6 or 7 years old. I was on the farm. My grandparents had a farm. We were over there helping out with the farm. And my brother and I were getting off of this wagon that we used on the farm, and we're running down this gravel driveway, and I just didn't see a water pipe there on the back of a water truck. And I just ran into it full speed and split my head wide open, had to get rushed to the hospital with a police escort and all those things. In fact, I was at the hospital so much that they used to question my parents and I in separate rooms because they thought they were abusing me.
Oh,
so I had all these different things going on, and that was sort of physically uncomfortable growing up and emotionally uncomfortable knowing that I was a little bit different than other kids. I couldn't drive a car at night in high school, and that was socially uncomfortable and dealing with all that. And then I go to college. I was studying to go into the medical field because I wanted help with the people. And then at 21 years old, I lost the rest of my eyesight to this eye condition. And I honestly wasn't even sure how I was going to help myself. We ask kids all the time what they want to be when they grow up, and none of them said they want to be a blind person, but that was my reality. And I was 21 years old, had to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, didn't know what I could be, let alone what I wanted to be. And so switched my major from pre-med to business at that point because I just thought it was flexible enough. It would allow me to go in a lot of different directions. Ended up having a life-changing experience when I went to Leader Dogs for the Blind to get my first guide dog. We can talk about that, but I basically had this tremendous pivot in my mentality. I went from being a victim of blindness to finding all the things that I have in my life to be grateful for, and had a lot to do with the incredible human beings I met there when I was at that guide dog school, getting my first guide dog. And so I came back to the University of Tennessee with a new lease on life, new perspective, new guide dog, appreciation. My attitude improved, and doors started flying open for me. Everything started to unfold from that point forward. My dog was a great ambassador for me because before I was trying to see okay without a cane, without any correctable way to see any better, and so I was bumping into people. They thought I was drunk or high or whatever, and truth is I just couldn't see that well. But I was essentially trying to act like I could see okay when I couldn't. I was trying to pretend to be somebody I wasn't. And coming back with a 100-pound German Shepherd named Miles walking around on campus there in Knoxville forced me to embrace the very thing that I'd been trying to run from, my blindness, because you can't hide a German Shepherd in a classroom. You've got to own that. And it taught me how to own not only the dog, but own my situation. And that's when really, things started to take off for me. And so I made straight A's from that point forward. All of the college and business administration classes, I made straight A's, had a new learning system. My mom read all my college books to audio cassette for me, so I didn't want to let her down because of the Herculean, if I can say the word, task of reading all those books. I didn't want to let her down.
Wow.
And I made straight A's, made the dean's list, ended up getting a job at a top consulting firm, and that's when I started in the corporate world. And
gotcha.
So that was 24 years ago, 23 years ago. And so, yeah, since then I've had jobs ranging from a consultant writing code. I taught myself how to write code to engineer software without being able to see my computer screen. You mentioned some of that. I was building software for the visually impaired for an Oracle application that they didn't think was possible.
Right. It struck me as I read that, kind of like in the bio, I'm like, that would be a lot easier to do if you could use the thing that you were inventing at the time to do it. like I assume, here I am just, just simple logic would lead me to believe that you didn't have that assistive technology while you were developing it because it didn't exist. So that's got to be, it's really cool. Did you find, were there other assistive technologies you had to embrace to do that, I would assume?
Now, I use the same screen reading technology, but I would use the advanced utilities that are built into it that most users don't know. So in order to be able to write code for that program, you really have to understand all the advanced tools that come with the program, but then you also have to know what's the desired way to use the CRM application, how do people with sight use it, and then you need to build a bridge and understand the architecture of the application so that you can pull the information out that you need. And so I basically had to reverse engineer the application, and I could see that there were things sitting inside the web application in the HTML source code that I had to parse out. So basically I had to cache the HTML source code to an INI file and then do the same thing, really reverse engineer how the ActiveX control was working. There was an ActiveX control. It's called list applets and form applets, but it was high interactivity framework, had links and just different ways of interacting. So you could think of it as like a standard Windows control built into a web page, not a form, not a web form, but it had, standard, we call them 132 controls and web form controls. And so I figured out a way to stitch those together based on the reverse engineering I did of the web application and made them accessible via the keyboard with the appropriate labels read for the visually impaired user, had it translated into French as well, because I had Canadian clients who needed it as well. And so it was just a lot of trial and error of understanding what was buried in that HTML source code and figuring out how to build the stitching between that and the on-screen elements.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned Miles, I think you said was the name of your dog, if I remember that. And it occurred to me, a lot of people that I have known over the years. And it's interesting because some of this is more sharp and dramatic in certain instances, whether it has to do with a disability or a sudden change in someone's health or situation. And then there's also the inevitable need for this skill that everybody has if they simply live long enough because of age-related health changes. But I've just noticed over and over again, people that there's a natural human resistance to utilize support, help from others, and assistive devices, technologies, practices, whatever. There's a resistance. And then almost everyone that I've ever met, in fact, probably everyone I've ever met who's told me about their process has said that once they finally did it, whatever shame, embarrassment, fear, whatever they had to get over to do it, they were like, well, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done this before. I mean, there's that feeling
Yeah.
of like this
Yeah,
opens
yeah,
so
yeah.
many doors. Was that your experience?
With the assistive tech and the guide dog, absolutely. Because, as I came back from that first experience getting my first guide dog, Miles, I came back and my attitude improved because I saw people there who had it worse off than me. There were people there who were deaf and blind, and they were getting a dog to be independent, and that just completely reshaped how I saw the world. I realized that I didn't sign up for blindness no more than I'd signed up for having perfect hearing or my cognitive faculties. There were people up there who were mentally impaired in addition to being blind. So all these different things that none of us sign up for. None of us get to control all the circumstances that we're dealt in life, but we all get to choose how we respond to those circumstances. And so I started taking inventory of the things that I had to be grateful for versus just the things that I lacked. And so that it shifted my mindset from being a victim of blindness when I rolled into the training school up there to coming back with a much different outlook on life. And certainly the dog helped in terms of mobility, but also in terms of ambassadorship, helping me meet new people, definitely improved my social life. People were much friendlier. They didn't think that I was some weird guy who was stoned or high or whatever, bumping into them. They knew that, I had a visual impairment, and it's like, oh, okay, he's got something going on. And it removed the weight from my shoulders because no longer did I have to pretend to be someone who I was not. I could be myself and just own my situation. And it allowed me to do that in a much lighter way with a lot more ease. And the technology, I embraced the technology when I came back from Leader Dogs for the Blind because I met someone up there who was checking their email. My roommate, said he was going to check his email, and I thought he had lost his mind. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to go check your email? How are you going to do that? And so that's when I found out about the technology that's available. And I came back, and it was like a dog with a bone once I got my hands on the technology, because I knew it would be the gateway to the world for me. And like I tell everybody, when I'm giving a presentation, one of the first things I tell them, and it's a little tongue in cheek, but there's a lot of truth to it, is that this is a really good time to go blind. And people get a little nervous, like I'm going to start recruiting and take applications, but it's, it's not that kind of time to go blind, but it's all about perspective. There are a lot of tools available, whether it's, my smartwatch, my smartphone, the fact that I can use my phone to talk to my thermostats or my home theater system or my car or any number of different things that we can control and access now that we have technology to help us and assistive technology. And that certainly, I wish I hadn't waited so long to lean into it, but I guess everything happens for a reason and in due course.
Well, and there's that feeling too that it happens the way it happens, right? And that's what we work with, which I hear wrapped up a lot in your message. Specific to blindness, there's a friend of mine. She's been a guest on this podcast before. Kristen Lopez. She's a film writer. She specializes wrote a book about disabilities as portrayed in media and movies. But she's the first one who told me this, and it was very fascinating to me to read a little bit about this. That with blindness in particular, when they're shooting a movie or a TV show or whatever, they bring in, of course, consultants. And when they bring in disability and blindness experts and those who are blind to help shape the scripting and the shooting scenes, they have found that consistently test audiences don't believe that the person's blind because they're so functional if they function the way that an actual person with blindness functions in real life. Anyway, in other words, there's assumptions people make. And I think these assumptions we internalize. If we can watch a movie and go, well, that's not realistic, when it's actually maybe scaled down already from what someone could accomplish in real life.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see those people who have that reaction go with me on a run on a black diamond,
well,
do
that's
some
the
skiing
thing. Yeah,
or get on the mat and let's do some jujitsu. And let me tell you how you think a blind person rolls.
How did you exactly that's my thought is, that assumptions that we get that soak down so much so that we just assume they are truths. And then, of course, that projects onto our sense of self when we do experience a change, right, in our lives. This is how someone like me now, I'm like this now. And it's like actually just a person still. And there's a lot to discover. I mean, how do you approach some of those kinds of things differently than people would, or has it hard? Or does it all kind of go back to that change in mindset, I guess? Does that make sense? Because you do a lot of things people would not associate. People would just associate the ability of sight with those activities you were just talking about, usually.
Yeah. So is your question, how do I approach the activity or how do I approach the people?
Those are both probably better than wherever I was going. Let's see. Yeah, no, let's talk about the activity first, and then maybe the people too. You can we can see which one comes in first.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the activity. So first of all, I've got to have some reasonable amount of confidence that I'm not going to get killed. That's kind of the
It's always
first
good.
thing. So
Yeah.
snow skiing, it's like, okay, I didn't know how to snow ski. I was 38 years old. My buddy called me and said, hey, I was in Aspen. I got a business partner out there. We're doing a guy's getaway, and they had an adaptive ski program out there, and they teach people who can't see to ski. And I was like, that doesn't really sound too safe. You got to tell me more about that. I got to learn more about that. And I learned that there was some of the world's best instructors for skiing, and they have a communication system where headgear, mic, it's all wired into the helmet. It's all Bluetooth communication, and so you get a series of directions left and right and all that. And so it gave me some confidence that I could maybe try and figure this thing out. So I go out there the next year and start getting comfortable with the idea that I was knowingly, willingly strapping on a pair of skis and bindings to go down a mountain. And that took some time to get comfortable with that. But I saw that there was some possibility there. I made some progress. I started falling less. Didn't stop falling, but started falling less. It's not a great combination for the record when you don't know how to ski. You're 38 years old and you can't see where you're going and you can't control where you're going either. It's kind of not the best combination in the world. But after literally hundreds of falls, ended up year over year getting better and better to where now I regularly ski black and sometimes double black diamonds. But it starts with seeing some progress incrementally. And I think anytime we're taking on something new, we have to be very careful to make sure that the consequences of failure aren't too great. So I didn't take on skiing and say, all right, let me take on a double black diamond day one. Like, that'd be foolish, right? We all know we would likely end up dying or at least be seriously injured. And I think the same's true in life. We're taking on something new, whether it's a new career, a new pivot of some sort. You want to do something that allows you to start building momentum, so you don't start off at the highest possible level with that. You start off where you start to teach your brain that you can make progress, and maybe it doesn't happen overnight, but you can start to just gradually move towards where you want to be. And that's kind of how I approached that. And jiu-jitsu was the same way. Ironically, I got into jiu-jitsu because I wanted to spend more time with my kids doing some activity. Like, a lot of parents will teach their kids how to play ball, or how to shoot a basketball, or play catch. That's really not an option for me. Being blind, playing catch, probably not the best idea. End up with a black eye. It's probably not great. But so what I did is I went into the Jiu-Jitsu Academy and started learning that it's all hands-on. There's no striking in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's all a series of chokeholds and joint locks. And I really just wanted to be able to spend time with my kids doing some activity. And although I can't teach them how to shoot a jump shot, I can teach them a fighting system for them defending themselves. And so we'll go to jiu-jitsu regularly and train. I go 6-7 days a week when I'm not traveling. And like yesterday, I was with my daughter in the basement and we did some technique. The gym was closed, but 16-year-old daughter, let's go downstairs. Let's go over some technique. Let's get some rolling in. And we get to bond with that. And there's plenty of opportunity in the sport, in the martial art, of getting comfortable with discomfort. And I think it teaches us so much about life. It's more than just a fighting system, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a way of being. It's a way of life, because it teaches you that when things get bad, the worst thing you can do is panic. If you're in a roll with somebody and a black belt takes your back and they're looking to choke you out, what do you do when you first start? You do what most people do. You panic, your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets out of control. You make all the wrong moves because you're not thinking clearly. And, the more you train, the more you realize that you should stay calm, you should stay relaxed, and you could find a way out of the situation. And ironically, a lot of times those bad situations actually do have a way out if you can just stay calm and relaxed enough to look for them. And that's true in our lives as well. It's not just on the mat when you're in a fight. It's true in your personal life or in your professional life. Maybe something feels like it has you in a chokehold, but if you stay calm and you stay relaxed, a lot of times you can find your way out of that situation. But I really like jiu-jitsu because it teaches you that you can't be great overnight. You got a lot of people out there looking for overnight success, whether it's a viral video or, I want to be a 22-year-old CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. It's like, that's not really how it works. And you roll in there on jiu-jitsu and you find out pretty quickly, if you think you're talented, you think you're athletic, you get on the mat with somebody who's trained, you don't have a shot. Like, you get humbled very, very quickly. They will put you in your place. And so it teaches you the importance of having that beginner's mind and putting down the ego and the pride that we all, I think, walk around with. A lot of us, we have ego, we have pride, and we want to win. We want to win, and that's important. But jujitsu teaches you better than anything else that I've found that winning only happens after learning. And in order
Yeah.
to learn, you have to check the ego, you have to check the pride and keep that beginner's mind and stay humble and do the hard work. And over a course of years, you can start leading to more and more learning, which eventually results in winning.
Wow. You mentioned something I think is an important element that oftentimes not only do we not realize it's there, it's not even preached, which we get there's the courage part, which is go for it. But you've mentioned this other part, which is, I'm going to call it kind of that purposeful going for it, right? You had mentioned like in the metaphor of your story, right? It's like, boy, just going down the worst slope at first is not how you learn to ski. And so you have to say, okay, is this safe for me to do first? Which when you have to think that, you get used to thinking that, and you don't do the thing where if you don't, I mean, the charging in without really being purposeful, to me, once again, if I'm using the metaphor of your story, that would be like pretending I can see fine in a way. And I think a lot of people do that. In fact, some of our, some of the some of the messages that people may internalize out there, a whole bunch of stuff out there people can get as far as this, like, kind of with self-empowerment coaches sometimes, or even self-appointed gurus who just basically, many of which, hey, great, but we talk about this a lot on the program, that how ways to discern. I just did a short episode the other day about kind of trying to discern about, if you're getting like a bunch of TikToks from somebody who we don't know who they are, and they just say, go for it, be courageous, just throw it all to the wind, quit your job tomorrow and become a, whatever. And what you're saying is like, actually, here's this other important piece of going for it, which is go for it intelligently and purposefully as well. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't set yourself up for failure. Like the first time I get on the mat as a jujitsu practitioner, I'm not talking smack to the black belts on the mat. Like that's pretty dumb. I go in there
Sure.
and that's it's a good way to end up with, a lot of humility served my way, or maybe even an injury. And so you have to be very deliberate about, making progress. And it's understanding that nothing great happens overnight, right? Nothing great happens overnight. Everything that is worth having takes time to build. It takes time to create, and it requires hard work. It requires dedication, commitment, respect for other people, humility, a learning mindset, all the things that jujitsu teaches us. That's why I love having our kids in it. We go and train all the time. We're living this culture where overnight shipping from Amazon, and everybody's looking for the next way they can get instantly gratified. And jujitsu teaches you that that's not how great things happen. Nothing comes instantly in jujitsu. You go there and you train 2 hours every day, and you might get 0.1% better. And it's really, really hard. And it's really front loaded to losing, which is why I think a lot of people drop out. It's because it's so front loaded to losing. Most people's egos can't handle that. It's very hard. It's like there are days you're like, what the hell am I even doing here? Like, this is hard. But you learn, hey, some days you're the hammer and some days you're the nail. And on days that you're the nail, just show up tomorrow. Keep working. On the days that you're the hammer, show up tomorrow and keep working. If you show up and do the work, it will lead to success. It's continuing to put forth the effort and the commitment and not expecting anything overnight. And the other interesting thing that it's helped me with, and this is, speaking from someone who's been an achievement-oriented person my whole life, I've been driven by achievements. It's all about the next trophy that we're putting in the trophy case. It's kind of helped me reorient my attention. When I first went into BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was all about, okay, what's my next stripe? When am I getting my belt? What's the next whatever, the achievement? And I learned after about a year or so, year and a half, it's like, this is making it less fun, thinking about that stuff. And so since then, I've really just settled into the enjoyment of the process. I just love to go train. Some really great people there. You would think, stereotypically, I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that people who would be training in a martial art like that would be very competitive and very dominant. And there are some people who you would not want to see in a bad situation on the street in there, but some of the best human beings with the biggest hearts you'll ever meet, because no person ever earned their belt alone. They needed partners, they needed teachers, they needed instructors, they needed people to help them along the way. And so it's a really great community to help you with that. And it's really refreshing and nourishing to find that. But to me, it's taught me so much more than just a fighting system. And so it's great that our kids get to go in there and experience that to help combat a lot of the instant gratification that we see out in our society today.
Yeah. I'm curious about the phrase you've used, the becoming comfortable with discomfort. I wonder if we could focus in on that a little bit and say,
it's huge.
Why do you think it's important? And also, what do you think helps people to pivot into being able to do that? I'm sure those are connected kinds of questions. Like, why is it important?
Yeah.
And how do we actually do it?
I think that's probably one of the main reasons that I'm at where I'm at today, is because my life has been so uncomfortable for me. Growing up, running into stuff, not the most comfortable thing. Socially, not being able to be the same as other kids in school, not driving at night, that was uncomfortable. Getting a guide dog and walking into a classroom and then a boardroom, a job interview, crisscrossing the globe, traveling to China or Singapore, Europe or South America with just me and my guide dog, not being able to see, not being able to read the signage, but still getting up at 5 a.m. for a morning workout, trying to find the gym, feel my way around the exercise room, what machine I needed to do the work that I wanted to do that morning. All that stuff's uncomfortable. And now my comfort zone over time has expanded. And so that's why I do things like go compete in BJJ tournaments or downhill ski on black and sometimes double black diamonds. It's because my comfort zone has expanded. And now I realize that the reason I'm at where I'm at today is I keep pushing the edge of my comfort zone. And that's where growth happens. The simple fact of the matter is, if you're never getting outside of your comfort zone, then you're not growing. Life begins outside of your comfort zone. And so for me, comfort zones are another way of saying complacency. And nothing remarkable ever comes out of being complacent. And so I just feel like it's so crucial for growth, for innovation. It's one of my 5 pillars of resilience. So I talk about when I speak professionally at conferences and trade shows, whatever, it's the anatomy of resilience. There are 5 pillars. The 4th one, which leads to growth, leads to innovation, allows people to build cultures that prize learning and experimentation and innovation over perfection. It's what eventually leads to all those things. It's getting comfortable with discomfort. Now, how do you get people more comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable? I think it starts with tolerating mistakes, whether it's, we're talking at a corporate level, our mistakes, so admonished that people are afraid to do new things. That could be a problem.
Yeah.
In order to take chances, you have to tolerate some of that. You don't want people making the same mistake twice, but you have to have a mindset that's fine with experimentation and realizing that, hey, I'm probably not going to get all this right. It's probably not going to be flawless. The first time I did jujitsu, the first time I skied, I had the mindset of, I'm probably going to suck at this. This is probably going to be terrible, but I'm going to try it because it sounds like it could be interesting. And who knows, I might have some fun along the way. And by starting really small, as I mentioned earlier, keeping the stakes, the consequences low, you can start to teach your mind that you're capable of more than you thought you could. And that's true for all of us. We are all capable of more than we give ourselves credit for. That includes you, and that includes your listeners. Everybody is capable of more than they give themselves credit for. If you'd asked me when I was 21 years old, going blind in college, would I end up doing a third of the things that I'm doing right now? There's no way I would have thought any of that was possible. I was stuck in the poor me victim mentality. But over time, I learned how to shift my mindset. I learned how to tell myself better stories, which is pillar number 2 of my anatomy of resilience. You will become the stories that you tell yourself. So you have to tell yourself the right stories. Instead of telling yourself stories of poor me and I'm a victim, you have to learn how to tell yourself empowering stories. And for me, it was maybe I went blind because I'm one of the few people who can deal with it, who can overcome it and use it as a tool to help other people. And that became my story. So we all have these opportunities in front of us. Oftentimes, these opportunities are masked in challenges and obstacles.
That's. I was just saying that I just flashed back to, I think it was just yesterday. It was either yesterday or the day before. My 9-year-old was reading a book. It's this little book, The Tale of Despero. If anybody out there is familiar, it's a book. There's a movie about it. It's about a mouse with big ears who is shunned by all the other mice and gets into trouble because he's not afraid. And that's a cultural value amongst the mice in this story, is to be afraid of things. But he's really, really obsessively into fairy tales, and he wants to be a knight and all this jazz. Anyway, I won't spin off all into the weeds of the plot, I guess. But at this one point where he's facing something super scary, she's reading this out loud, and I find myself getting emotional as I'm listening, because it's like he says, "Well, if I want to be this kind of knight, this fairy tale character, I need to go through this that I'm about to go through, even if I'm scared." And so he just repeats to himself, "Once upon a time." And so it just hit me. That just hit me as you were saying that. It was like, what's the story? Well, once upon a time, I went through this and I made it. Right? That kind of a thing is, what do you want your story to be? That ties it in. I mean, that if you really, really try to live that ties in with the decisions that you're making, really all the time, right?
It's so fundamental to how we think. It's, of my 5 pillars of resilience, I don't know. I don't know if it's the most important one, but certainly it controls. It's all about mindset. So my first pillar is choose your response. You have to know that you're in control of your situation. You don't get to control the cards that you're dealt in your life, but you alone get to choose how you play your cards. This pillar number 2 of telling yourself the right stories, I can guarantee you this. You will become your stories. Whether they're good stories, whether they're bad stories, whether they're stories of how you're a victim or stories of how you're a visionary, able to navigate whatever obstacles life throws at you, you will become your stories. So you have to choose them wisely. The third pillar that I talk about is visualizing greatness. I had to reimagine how to make blind look good. Now, it's a little tongue in cheek, but think about it. If I can never imagine how to make my situation look good, how could I ever move towards acceptance of that situation? Pillar number 4, we've spent some time on already, which is getting comfortable with discomfort. And then there's the 5th one, which is take advantage of your disadvantages. And the thought there is every perceived disadvantage offers some advantage if we use it in the right context. And so it's just stepping back and thinking, hey, I can't control all the circumstances that I find myself in, but I've got to own my situation. I've got to be accountable for my life and for my outcomes in life. Because if I'm not accountable for me, then who will be? I've got to own it and figure out how to work with what I've been given. And it's ironically, it's the meaning that we attach to our circumstances that's far more significant than just the facts alone.
Mm-hmm. That's something I think about an awful lot, which is the advantage, disadvantage, those relationships you just mentioned. And thinking of like both sides of the coin, like we usually we're either painfully aware of our disadvantages, or we focus on our advantage as its own thing separate from that. It's like we say strengths and weaknesses, but we don't often talk about the fact that they are tied together oftentimes within the same challenge or even the same character trait oftentimes. How do you, when you see people working with that, what do you have feelings about what can help us to find the advantages within or connected to the disadvantage? Like how do you recognize that? What have you found with that?
Yeah, I lead workshops in this too when I'm taking companies through the anatomy of resilience, and I do a keynote and then we'll do a workshop. I help people think through this very thing, but it's taking a step back and looking at it with fresh eyes and sort of brainstorming in what situation can this perceived disadvantage help me. And there's some obvious examples in my life. Going blind, you see me skiing and you're like, okay, being blind is probably not a big advantage to be a snow skier. Well, I don't know. There are a lot of people that I'm with on the mountain and they look downhill and they see all the terrain and they're like, I'm not going down that. And it doesn't stop me. That doesn't faze me at all. And so most people are staring at this big mountain with 5,000 feet of elevation from 12,000 feet up in the air and seeing all the things that can go wrong. And I'm not looking at any of that. The only thing I'm focused on is the next turn that I have to make. So I'm not looking at all the rocks and all the trees and like all the terrain, the pitch, and I'm just focused on, I don't have to ski 5,000 feet of elevation. I've just got to make a left turn. And then I've just got to make a right turn and then another left and then another right. I'm able to break down that big, scary goal of skiing down a black or whatever it is into bite-sized components because of my blindness.
Which is
if I
how
could
you
see,
really should learn anyway, I guess, in a way, right? I mean, it emphasizes the
yeah,
things that actually in sport and athletic pursuits, you do have to you have to be micro aware of like, okay, my body goes this way, then this way, and that. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
fascinating. I hadn't thought about that. It's like I don't see that big tree and wonder how do I not hit that if I can't see it.
yeah. There are some advantages. I ski, ironically, a little more fearlessly than other folks, but I'm not consumed by all the things that can go wrong. And so when I've got this big scary goal in my life of skiing down this mountain or anything else, whether it's starting a new business, whatever the case may be, I've learned, okay, you need a bold vision of greatness that inspires you to take action and do the hard work that you need to do to get there. But when you're on the mountain and it's time to execute, you just got to zoom in on whatever that next turn is, whatever that next action is that you need to take. And like I said, for me, skiing helps me do that because I cannot see. And so they're out there. These advantages are everywhere. Like, I would consider myself a better listener because I'm blind. And think about it. I don't get distracted by a whole lot because there's not a whole lot for me to look at. So I'm pretty dialed into the conversation because I've got nothing else to do. So it's created some advantages for me in terms of being a better listener, being a better communicator, not judging people based on how they look, listening to the content of the person as opposed to surface level appearances. And so you could argue that in some ways I'm able to see people more deeply because of my blindness, because I'm not distracted by all the other things that are surface level.
Sure. Which once again, in that whole assumptions and what gets kind of baked into us, right? People don't even necessarily realize that they are doing those things. But that's great points to see. Now, was that number 4? I wanted to make sure you got all pillars out.
I did. Yeah, I got off. That was 5. So
was
one
5.
was
good.
One was just to recap. 1 was choose your response. 2 was tell yourself the right stories. 3 was visualize your greatness. 4 was get comfortable with discomfort. And 5 was take advantage of your disadvantages.
Right. Do you have a feel for, is there a top 1 or 2 or some of the top obstacles that you find that block people from being able to fully feel empowered?
Fear.
Okay.
It's fear. I mean, it's causes an action. Fear causes an action, and it's an action that eventually leads to extinction. There was a study done by Harvard Business Review. Study was done back in 2016, and it looked at the Dow Jones Industrial, the 30 companies that made up the Dow Jones Industrial. And as of 1991, by 2016, 50% of those companies had gone extinct.
Wow.
Half of them. And it was because of it. And I think an action leads to extinction, and an action is caused by the fear. I mean, there's another thing out there. It's called the loss aversion principle. It teaches us that the fear of loss is twice as powerful as the incentive to gain. Meaning, we would have to risk. We'd have to win $20 in order to risk losing $10. Fear dominates our decision. Even if we don't think it does, it's always there, looming over us. And so that's why I think just understanding how fear can dominate our brain waves, how do we move through that, and how do we motivate ourselves to settle into the fact that, things might not always go perfectly. And that's why I try to remind folks that, as far as I know, we only have one life to live. And so anytime I think about fear, it's always appropriate in my mind to think about counter fears. So I'll give you an example. When I was leaving college, and I've been made a job offer, had 2 job offers. One was from Capital One, really good financial services company. Another one was from Anderson Consulting, really good technology company. I felt very fortunate to have 2 great job offers. One was in Florida, the Tampa area, and the other one was in Atlanta. I ended up opting for the job with Anderson Consulting in Atlanta, and I'd been blind for about a year. I got a guide dog. I had a guide dog for about a year. I was just learning how to use a computer, and I had to move from Knoxville to Atlanta. I'd never lived out of the city. I'd lived in Knoxville my whole life. I was 25 years old. I was on a 6.5 year college program because I went blind in college. Had to flush 3 years of university work down the drain, start all over. So I'm getting ready to move to Atlanta, and my friends and my family, where they would come to me, they're like, "Hey, are you scared or are you excited?" And I'm like, "No, I'm excited. Like I can't wait to go there. I'm really excited." But the truth that I hid from them and that I hid from myself maybe is that I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was really scared because I had to move to Atlanta. I didn't have family there. I didn't have a support system. It was just me and my guide dog. I couldn't drive, obviously. There was no delivery service back then. So I wasn't even sure how I was going to get my groceries. I didn't know how I was going to get around. I had to learn the bus and the train system without being able to see. Just
Well,
me and my guide dog.
and it hit me just now as you said that that may have been one of the first times you were leaving, at least in Knoxville. I'm sure you hadn't seen every square inch of the city, but you had memories of what things look like in most of the
Oh
places
yeah,
you went, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, and I didn't know anything about Atlanta. I just knew it was a big city, and I had a job that I had to learn how to get downtown. I had to travel regularly to new cities, new airports, new client sites, new hotels, navigate the world's busiest airport, Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport. And I had to learn a new job, learn how to write code without being able to see. And straight up, man, I was terrified. I was really, really scared. But I realized at that point, at 25 years old, I knew that there's a counter fear. There's the fear of failing, which I had plenty of, but there's also the fear of not knowing what's possible. Which fear could I live with? Could I live with the fear of trying at 25 years old and failing and having to go back home with my tail tucked between my legs and saying it didn't work out? I'm going to have to take a place in that loser basement that my parents had built for me. As well intended as it was, I didn't think of it as fondly as maybe as they, but that was an option. But the other fear is, looking back on my life in my golden years and never knowing how wildly successful my life could have been if I'd only tried. And I decided that for me in the long arc of life, the scarier thing was not knowing. I didn't want to have to wonder, did I get everything that I could have out of this life? I'm going to win some, I'm going to lose some. I'm not going to win them all. That's fine. If you're never failing, then you're not aiming high enough. I want to know where my edges are. I want to push those edges. I want to grow. I want to expand. And the only way to do that is to take a few chances and certainly, not being careless about it, but not letting fear of failure to stop me in my tracks. And that's the risk, is that it stops you from ever even knowing your full potential.
Well, and I really like how when you talk about that, just it changes the way this ties back into one of your other pillars, which is the definition of a failure or a mistake becomes actually an expected part of a learning process, to where, I mean, we can say that and give lip service to it all we want, but we still often look at it like, oh, I failed at something, therefore that means something bad happened, instead of saying, no, actually that means I am in the process of learning. It's like that like, to go back to your, like, am I the hammer, am I the nail? Well, if you have a toolbox full of hammers or you have a big box of nails, you don't have the other one, you're not building very much. So they're both pretty important to put some together. So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. And how do you know where your limits are? No. And you've got to be failing every now and then, right? Otherwise, how do you are you really pushing yourself? Are you really growing? If you're literally never failing, then you're leaving a lot on the table. You're leaving a lot on the table. There's so much out there. You're capable of so much more than you're even trying for, which I certainly don't want to have that. I want to know at the end of my life, when I look back, that I won at some, I failed at others, but I lived and I tried And I really went for it and did the best that I could. And I had fun along the way. I was able to pursue some of my passions and dreams and hopefully make a small difference in the world somehow.
Well, let's share with everybody a little bit where they can find you. Now, you have a nonprofit as well. You've started. I want you to be able to tell everybody where they can find you and your work. But if you would, I always like to share each episode a little bit about a charity or nonprofit. And you were telling me you have a foundation that you've set up.
Yeah, I started one this year. It's called the Blind Ambition Foundation, and really excited about empowering people from disadvantaged communities with resilient thinking, as well as the people around them, and empowering them so that they know what they can do to help raise children who are facing extraordinary circumstances, and giving them the tools that they need to live their own independent, productive, successful lives, and making sure that they're the people who are growing up with disadvantages aren't being further disadvantaged by the culture they find themselves in. And I'm very fortunate that my parents didn't hold me to a lower standard because I was dealing with what I was dealing with. I think out there we have a tendency to want to protect our loved ones. I know if my kids had a disadvantaged situation, certainly my instincts would be to help them, to shelter them, to protect them. But it's easy to lose track of the fact that we're not raising kids, we're raising adults. And if we're not equipping them to become adults and live a happy, successful life, then ultimately we're hurting them. And so really excited about bringing this to life. We're at the very early innings of this. Would love to see this continue to grow so we can continue to impact more lives and get people thinking in a way that that really does empower people to live out their best lives and reach their full potential.
Right. Where do people find the foundation? What's the web for that?
If they go to my website, it's chadefoster.com. There's a link there in the navigation bar for foundation. They can click on that. And that same website, obviously, down at the bottom, it's got all my social media handles, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the different handles are there. They can click on that. And got lots of videos out there. People can see clips of me speaking on stage. The link to the book is there as well. Got a masterclass that'll be coming out January and February, where we teach people in detail the anatomy of resilience, take people through a lot of the building blocks, what it takes to live a happier, more successful life. So that'll be out there in January or February as well.
Great. Wonderful. Yes. And the book is Blind Ambition is the name of your book, right?
Correct.
Great.
Yes. Blind Ambition, how to go from victim to visionary, which is, I certainly knew about becoming a victim of my blindness until I figured out there was a different path. And so life's going to happen to all of us, right? Life's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. It's not if, it's when it happens. And so the key is figuring out, how do I attach myself to circumstances in a more meaningful way, in a more productive way, and emerge from my own setbacks better off than before. It was Friedrich Nietzsche who said, "He who has the why to live can bear almost anyhow." And so it's figuring out that meaning. How do we attach ourselves? And I love Viktor Frankl's work on the subject. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Bill George, who helped put me on this path with his True North Leadership Framework when I was studying at Harvard Business School. So all great resources as well, Viktor Frankl and Bill George.
Great. Well, appreciate so much you coming on to share this with everybody. Just a nod out there to all the listeners as well. As everybody knows, we on the show take a minute to plug a charity. We pick a charity in a local area each month, and this month our focus is on the White Bird Clinic in Eugene, Oregon, that works with the Portland area and around that area to do crisis intervention for mental health, as well as to make mental health, and dental healthcare available to those that are in lesser privileged or lesser able to access medical care in other circumstances. So they're doing a lot of good there, and worth your time to check out as well. If you go to whitebirdclinic.org, you can learn about them. You can pass along that link on social media, or if you are able and in a situation to do so, you can donate time or money to that as well. If you are a Patreon subscriber to The Broken Brain, or you wish to become one, whatever our charity of focus is within the month that you join, 50% of your donation, every month, as long as you remain a member, will go towards the charity of focus in the month that you joined. I think I said that in a way that made sense. So if anyone questions, I guess hit me up. But 50% of what you give pre-Patreon fees will go to that as long as you are a member. And you get access to our bonus materials, which can include video of all the interviews, also the bonus episodes, the history deep dives, as well as some of the things that we're doing there. You can find that at patreon.com/brokenbrain if you're interested in learning more about that. Chad, thank you again for being here with me.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Been great to talk to you as well. Have a good day.
All right. Likewise. Thank you, brother.
Thank you for listening to the Courtemp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Courtemp Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.
Hello. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the To Mom is to Love podcast. My name is Valerie Probstfeld. I am a nurse practitioner as well as an imperfect mom who loves. In fact, I thought I would be an A-plus mother before becoming a mom. However, as the years passed, I realized love is the only thing I can control. In fact, the verb to mother means to love. Merriam-Webster defines to mom as to give birth or rise, as well as to care for or protect. And just think about it. Love gives birth, allows ourselves and families to rise, and enables us to care for and protect. We have more power as moms than we realize. In 5 generations from now, you will have approximately 30 descendants, and the number keeps getting larger and larger. Motherhood is the most important job in the world. Our mission is to support, encourage, and empower each other as imperfect moms to love as a verb. Come join us as we navigate our shared name, live our verb, and rediscover our identity. Please subscribe, share, and follow. And I would love it if you leave a review so more moms can come join us. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as TikTok and YouTube. Please follow along with us on this beautiful journey we call motherhood.